Good morning, and welcome to Coffee with Phann. Now, you might notice it's not morning, I'm not Phann, and you actually have no way of knowing if this is even coffee, other than just taking my word for it. Anyway, today's brew is a bowl and basket salt and caramel coffee, and today's topic is video games of the bad variety. This coffee tastes. It's fantastic! Now, what exactly constitutes a bad video game, since quality is a very subjective thing? Well, I think I figured out what some key components of a game that most would consider to be bad is. A bad video game typically will often have severe technical failures, broken mechanics, and/or... Now, what are some games that are champions of the bad game genre? The first one that comes to mind would be Bubsy 3D. It is the 3D Bubsy game. A Bubsy game in the third dimension. Fun. Now, everybody knows Bubsy 3D is one of the worst games of all time. It's one of the de facto worst games of all time. But for what reasons? Now, having played the game myself, I would often say that the biggest problem with Bubsy 3D is it doesn't seem to know what it wants to be. It sort of wants to be this grand open world, but it also wants to be a linear game. It wants to be good, but it's also terrible. The biggest thing about it is it wants to be a fast and loose platformer, like the games that preceded it, or what they want you to believe the games that preceded it are like. But in actuality, it's very stiff. You've got these tank controls the whole way through, and your range of movement is very... I don't know how to describe it. It feels like you're trying to fight the game to do what it's supposed to do. And I would argue at that point, there is some kind of fatal flaw. Now, when Bubsy 3D started development, it was before the age of games like Crash Bandicoot, Mario 64, so the developers really had no idea how to just make a 3D platformer. There was no guide on how this was supposed to be done. But as they were developing the game, those games ended up coming out. We got Mario 64, we got Crash Bandicoot. We had a sort of concept of what the 3D platformer should be. One's a collectathon, one's a more linear game. They both handle the idea of 3D platforming quite differently. But the folks developing Bubsy 3D took a look at it, and they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to have it both ways. To make this open world big landscape, and to also do the get from one place to the other. And this was also while they were struggling to come up with what the design philosophy would be for this game. So the result is, it's kind of a mishmash of ideas, and none of them really work. The game's mechanics are, I guess they function. They're not necessarily what you'd call broken, but they just barely work. If your car can get you from point A to point B, but it'll occasionally just completely break down on you, is that a good car? Now, Bubsy 3D also is lacking in story. That's not to say that story is essential to a good experience. Mario 64 sort of sets you up with the princess has been kidnapped, go save her. Crash Bandicoot sort of gives you Crash's girlfriend is going to be experimented on, go save her. Bubsy 3D, I believe, has him stranded on some planet where the wool creatures from the first game came from, and now he's got to find a way out, and they see him as an outlaw, but that doesn't really matter because they're really just there and you can kill them in like one move, and you've got to collect these things, or like the MacGuffins, because apparently they'll help you get off. But the ending, really, you're screwed either way. either you don't get off the planet, or Bubsy ends up sent to, like, the Stone Age or something, and that's it. The Woolies win. It's a lose-lose scenario. And that about sums up the experience of Bubsy 3D. It's a lose-lose scenario because it's not a win for you. You're not necessarily having fun playing this game, and it's not a win for them either. It garnered them a terrible reputation. It could have been disastrous for them. Next up, a game with a similar tortured history, Superman 64. I know that name leaves a horrible taste in some people's mouths. I'm sure it doesn't mind. Definitely need a bit of a bigger swig of the coffee before talking about that one. Superman 64 features Superman being trapped in this virtual world by his nemesis Lex Luthor. And the goal is supposedly to rescue the real world versions of Lois Lane and Jimmy, what's his name. Now, once you start the game, you're immediately met with many problems. The flying controls are out of control, and all of this virtual metropolis it's all coated in this thick fog. It's like green kryptonite is what the manual or something calls it. Superman 64 immediately showcases one point of mine: severe technical failures. The controls are absolutely screwed. The draw distance is terrible. The game will sometimes just crash during the demo. Like the AI trying to... The game will occasionally even struggle to run during its own demo. The AI playing Superman flying through rings will occasionally just lose one, struggle to figure out where it's going, and then just give up. And the demo will end there. Broken mechanics. Maybe roll a clip here of the AI struggling to play. Need I say more? And or poor design that renders the game frustrating or unplayable. The flying through rings segment, the design that everybody is the most aware of, you have to fly around going through these rings, these green rings or yellow rings, I forget what the hell the color is, in order to, I don't know, appease Lex or something. And most would think that that's just the game, because that's usually where most game reviewers would stop. But that's not really the case. No, there's more. There's missions where you have to throw cars, or attack a certain enemy, or fulfill some kind of arbitrary requirement. It's a very mission-based game. You're essentially just doing anything because the game tells you to. And that's about it. There's no real drive to do anything. Now, the fundamental failure of Superman 64 is the game does not make you feel like Superman. When you play a game about the Man of Steel, one of the most powerful superheroes in the DC universe, you want to feel this sort of sense of power, of a sense of justice to be fulfilled, something like that. You don't really get any of that. It fundamentally fails to make you feel like you're accomplishing anything other than, I flew through rings, I threw a car once, I punched a guy, this is fun, right? Now, I can't entirely blame the developers for the severely broken quality of this game. If you read into the development history, they did want to make a good game. They wanted to do something true to the Superman character. But the management of Warner Brothers, they had other ideas. They really didn't even want them to be developed. They really didn't even want them to be the ones developing the game. They wanted someone more trustworthy, like Electronic Arts. Yeah. Yeah, that's a perfect idea.
No.
And as a result of this, they did whatever they could to sabotage the project. Every time they tried to implement any sort of gameplay design, they were like, Superman would never do that. Superman would never fly. Superman would never swim. Superman would never punch things. To the point where they would have to bring in comic books to prove that, yes, Superman can freaking swim! And they spent so much time doing this back and forth that by the time they were finally at the point of no return where they had to release something, what they had on their hands was a broken mess. Interestingly, the tale of Superman 64 didn't really end with the N64 game. There was another version. Yes, a version was developed for the PlayStation by Blue Sky Studios. And reportedly, this one is actually better from the prototype that was leaked and played. But by the time it was time to release it, the contract had expired. The contract had expired. And Warner Brothers expressed no interest in renewing this contract, so the game was scrapped, thrown away. Interesting how that works. This whole fiasco, and we end up with a terrible game of dubious quality for the Game Boy, and a okay game that never saw the light of day. Now, those are the main bastions of terrible quality, really low quality in a game. Of course, there's also something like Sonic 06, where, well, the whole damn thing is broken. But one could argue that Sonic 06 actually has some decent qualities to it. It had a story to tell, although it was rather dubious at best. Its level design was actually among the better level design in a Sonic game. It just suffered from really poor design because it was a rush job. Again, I'm sort of seeing a pattern. Usually the road to a bad game will often be paved with very good intentions. A developer will often set out to make something good. Nobody ever sets out to do something bad unless it's a cheap cash grab or something like that. But something usually always happens along the way that stops them, some kind of big roadblock, or a lengthy history of bad arguments among the developers or the publishers. This kind of discourse will often lead to a game being neglected. Can we call these games a child of divorce? Now, there are, of course, more obscure bad games. Power Pigs of the Dark Age for the Super Nintendo is a game that was also developed by Titus. We're all familiar with them. And also published by them. No, go back. Power Pigs of the Dark Age was an early game by Radical Entertainment that was published by Titus, good friends. And it's fine. It was released during the heat of the wave of mascot platformers, games that were striving to be the next thing, the next big platformer that would kill the hedgehog, kill the plumber, rise to the top. None of them really did. Power Pigs, most of all. I only ever really found out about Power Pigs when I obtained an emulator, a RetroPie, for Christmas. And I was looking through the catalog of games, and on them, among other weird titles, was Power Pigs of the Dark Age. And when I played it, I was met with, I wouldn't say an atrocity, really just massive disappointment. Or really something that thoroughly confused me. And this is not because it's an atrocious platformer. I mean, I've played many worse games in my time. But Power Pigs, it has these multiple pigs on the cover, but you can only play as one. It's very strange. It's actually...
Oh, no, I am coughing. Oh, it hurts so bad, my throat. Oh, no.
It's actually set up throughout the story. Well, the little bit of story you get in the introductory cutscene, that these are the heroes of the kingdom, multiple of them, with different strengths. You only ever really play as one, and you only see the other two on the title screen. Or box art, if you're being particular. And what does he do? He swings a sword. He eats donuts. Guy sounds like Homer Simpson. He's butt ugly. Power Pigs seems like they were trying to entertain themselves, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That was how Earthworm Jim was born, and that game was pretty good. But while trying to entertain themselves, they seem to have forgotten about creating something that's entertaining for us. It's fine. It plays decently. The music is pretty annoying, but not ear-grating. But it's boring. It's boring. Which is, in my opinion, worse than being endlessly frustrating or something that makes you want to
partake in non-network approved activities.
It leaves you just feeling nothing at all. And I think that's the biggest sin of all. It doesn't make you feel anything particularly strong. I think that's why it faded away with the sands of time. I'm sorry for bringing it up, actually. Circling back on Earthworm Jim. Now, the first game did actually get quite a positive reception, but the sequel... Now, that one was also rather positively received, but in retrospect, it's been sort of reappraised. And upon further examination, it's not actually quite as good as we may have remembered. Now, Earthworm Jim 2 starts off much the same as the first. It's a run and gun, a platformer, that sort of thing, with a sort of wacky twist. You fight these alien enemies, you deal with these falling grandmas while sitting on a chair that goes up these stairs. But then, as you go through the other levels, the mechanics immediately change. Immediately, we are faced with 1,000 new ideas at once. Jim's a blind cave salamander now, no reason why. Jim has an inflated head now, no reason why. Jim has to bring a hot air balloon from one end to the other to kill some mucus thing, I guess. No real reason why that's introduced. And they throw all these ideas at the wall, and they all play extremely differently from one another. But none of them really stand out in a positive way. None of them really achieve anything that would make you say that it was a great time, or none of it really feels like something you'd have to deal with in the first game. It felt like they weren't trying to do something better, they were trying to do something different. And yes, it is very different, but it's not good. It loses the heart of the original. That being, its gameplay sort of had a balance. There was a way to have it both. You could have the funny, and you could have the platforming and the shooting. And that's not to say that there weren't new ideas presented to you in Earthworm Jim 1. There was bungee jumping, there was a rocket race, which would result in a boss fight if you didn't win the race. And there was also this escort mission where you had to bring Peter Puppy from one end of the level to the other. Earthworm Jim 2 goes from idea to idea to idea, while the first game sort of sticks with one for a while, gets you comfortable with it before presenting you with a new one. And I think that's an interesting point, that a game can go from good to bad if it's weighed down by too much. there can be too little, and there can also be too much. Now, I understand quality is very subjective, but video games have sort of a list of genres you can choose from. People can make a platformer, a racing game, a first-person shooter, and there's usually always an objective, a solid objective, that the developer will set out to do. And I was going to go into this video saying that a bad video game would be when a developer fundamentally fails to do what they were setting out to do, or what the marketing said they were setting out to do. But in the end, I want to say that a game can completely achieve what it sets out to do and also be a miserable experience. Now, what separates a bad game from a game that isn't your cup of tea? Now, Madden 22. I personally can't stand the game. I don't like any of the Maddens, but it succeeds at being a football simulator. It's fine. People actually quite love the game, and I won't dog on them for that. What was I talking about? Now, that's a game that's not my cup of tea, but what makes a game bad? Now, we already said that a bad game will tend to have technical failures, broken mechanics, or poor design that render the game frustrating or unplayable. But as we've now discussed, a bad game can also be boring. A bad game can also be too much at once. A bad game can be too little. A bad game can be really anything. It could happen to anything. It could happen to anyone. It could even happen to you! I dramatically pointed at the camera. So I guess, after all is said and done, the moral of the story here is you can't be teed off once you've teed off. And also, don't ever have your game published by Titus. Thank you for joining me. This has been Coffee with Phann, more like Coffee with Phann, really. And I won't see you in the next video, that's for sure. Good night.